Good morning.
Good morning.
It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker for our annual observation of the legacy of Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement Assembly. A copy of his biography is included in your programs. I will highlight some of his accomplishments. Our guest speaker, Alderman Jason C. Ervin, has been the Alderman of the 28th Ward since February 2011. He received his bachelor's degree in accounting at Southern Illinois University, Salukis, and a master's in public administration from Governor State University. Before serving as Alderman, he served on the local school council at 2 public schools, where he showed commitment to improving education and creating stronger schools, because a strong foundation in education is essential to providing the best opportunities for people. Alderman Ervin is dedicated to public service and empowering communities through social change and political organizing. In his position as village manager of the village of Maywood, he implemented changes that made government run more efficient and better for residents. The same type of attitude and thinking is being brought to Chicago's West Side to make government work for the people. Economic development, safety for children, and working families are the top priorities for Alderman Ervin. This shows in his legislative agenda with introducing and voting on ordinances which expand economic opportunities for working families and reduce crime on city streets. Alderman Ervin is the chairman of the Chicago Automatic Black Caucus, as well as the chairman of the Committee on Contracting Oversight and Equity. In addition, he serves on 6 additional committees: Workforce Development, where he's the vice chair, Budget and Government Operations, Finance, License and Consumer Protection, Public Safety and Committees, and Rules and Ethics. Alderman Ervin is married to Chicago City Treasurer Melissa Conyers Ervin, and is a proud Providence St. Mel parent. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 28th Ward Alderman Ervin to the podium.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. And to each and every one of you, happy to be here, happy to be back. I think I was here maybe 8 or 9 years ago speaking at this very event. One thing that I will say, when I look at the students and the work that you all do to put this program together, while the balance of education is off today, you all are in school learning and being productive. And so I want to thank the school and the leadership for not having a day off, but a day on, where you're learning and bringing something forward to understand the challenges that our community faces and the challenges of the past that also bring us forward to the future. So again, I am happy to be here. This is probably one of the most important holidays of our community, that we celebrate the life and legacy of such a great man, Dr. King. I'm also happy because a schoolmate of you all, this is the first time she will actually hear me speak in such a forum. So I want to have a shout out to our first grade class. Where is Miss Point at?
Hands up, first grade.
First grade. And there she is, my little girl, Geneva. Also, my wife has joined me today, our city treasurer, as well as my mother, who's actually celebrating her birthday today. So, happy birthday. Some of the things that Dr. King talked about, I remember when I was young, and I thought I wanted to be a public official. But when you looked at public officials at the time, the background of the average public official didn't fit the profile of kids from the west side of Chicago. I was born in Austin, and I live here in the Garfield Park community, about 2 blocks right over on Jackson and Holman. So I know and understand the challenges that we face. People that live in this zip code are often told that they cannot succeed because where you live defines the capabilities instead of what you are in the content of your character, as Dr. King would say. But here in Providence and ML, I see you all show that that is not true. The words I heard, the songs that were sang, the people that spoke gave the best of our community. Again, while I had to also think about myself and what I wanted for my folks, that this is probably one of the best schools in the city because the excellence in academics is part one, but the building of the character is part two. As we reflect on today and we reflect on our great leaders such as Dr. King, and then we just talked about former Representative John Lewis, it is impossible for us to be where we are today without the work and sacrifice of those individuals. Now, I'm sure you all have learned about Dr. King and through your excellent education here. We all know that Dr. King had a dream, and the other part of that is the significance that our city played in Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. We heard a song from Mahalia Jackson, who was a Chicagoan. Dr. King spent more time in this city than any other city outside of the South, as he stated earlier, living on 16th and Hamlin to bring forth the challenging conditions that many of us faced back in the 60s in the North Lawndale community. You also know that he brought people together for the March on Washington in the 60s, again, a protest against the treatment of black folks in this country. You probably heard the I Have a Dream speech, was actually turned 60 this year, that talks about the promise of all men being created equal, which is relevant still to this day. And you also know that he was killed. Thankfully, his fight did not end with his death. His work inspired so many people to get involved with the civil rights movement and many young activists to bring a seat at the table. As the words of Morgan Freeman talked about of John Lewis, heroes getting into good trouble. First by joining Dr. King in the protest, and then through entering the public service as a congressman from Georgia. See, those people paved the way for people like myself and my wife, kids from the west side of Chicago, to reach our own dreams and continue to fight for reality in this country through the public process. But here I'm going to talk about a side of Dr. King and many that you may not know. His work was greater than just the securing of rights of us as a people. And in some respects, I say, as long as we were walking around in circles and singing "We Shall Overcome," folks they paid us attention, but really didn't try to really drop the true hammer that the federal government is known for dropping on. But before he was killed, when his focus shifted to economic justice, that's when a lot of things began negatively to impact Dr. King. If you go into the files that are now released from the FBI and how he was constantly under observation, constantly being monitored, constantly trying to discredit him. But again, they didn't do it to John F. Kennedy for all of the things that he did, and the press did not do it to Dr. King. But when Dr. King started to look at the living conditions of our community, when Dr. King talked about organizing poor people, that is when the trouble really began for him. Now, we could talk about the points of freedom, but can you ever truly be free if you're stuck in the grips of poverty? Can you ever truly be free if you don't have the right to participate in the voting process? Could you ever truly be free if you're living in substandard conditions? So he realized that the work he had done on the civil rights front was one thing, but in order for black folks to totally enjoy the pieces of the Constitution, and that all men being created equal, we had to move beyond just the civil rights front and move on to a front of economics, especially those of us who live in urban America. Remember, many of our family members came up from the South, from the Delta of Mississippi, from the cotton fields in Alabama, from all the places in Arkansas, here looking for a better life, but a better life, while it was better, it was not the equality that we had all thought about and dreamed of in this I Have a Dream. And he went on to say, what does it profit a man to eat at an integrated lunch counter if he doesn't have enough money to buy a hamburger and a cup of coffee? Again, economics. But Dr. King really understood that when he planned how he would fight for economic justice, it just wasn't about us as black people. This poor folks, and don't believe what you see. While we have challenging conditions in our community, go to the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. Go down into some of the parts of the deep rural South in Arkansas, and some of the places in New Mexico and Texas. You'll see people living in even worse conditions than we are. The only difference is that they don't look like us. But again, when we talk about economics, that's the great equalizer in this. So when Dr. King started his Poor People's Campaign, right before he was killed, and I believe, and I may not be alone in this, is that when he began to turn toward economics, because when people know if you have the ability to have economic freedom, that you no longer depend on anyone else but yourself. And when people understand that you don't have to depend on them, they don't have power over you. Again, they don't have the power over you. That is when you can reach your full potential. And while Dr. King began to bring people from all walks of life together who were struggling, including the Puerto Rican community, American Indians, Mexicans, poor whites, he had the revolutionary vision that the next chapter of his work would be the March on Washington to demand better working conditions and wages. He had often said that we're going to Washington to get our check, meaning that we needed the ability to have economic freedom. Now, the archives of his work include many speeches he had written for labor unions, workers' rights, conditions, and the Poor People's March did occur in the late 60s. But sadly, without Dr. King, as we know, he had passed on by this point. And you always have to remember, the plan in our community is that you kill the man, you can kill the plan. If you kill the man, you can kill the plan, which is why the government went on a tear to discredit him in the eyes of our community. But standing here a half a century later, Dr. King's message is still as relevant as today as it is forever, and that fight for economic justice continues. The fight matters because we are, as America, one of the richest countries in the world, but the gap between those at the top and those at the bottom widens on a daily basis. This fact matters because in Chicago, over 17% of residents are living in poverty. In our community, that number is 30% that live below the poverty line. How many miles, can somebody tell me how many blocks are in 3 miles? 3 miles, 8 blocks, a mile, 24 blocks. Would you know that in the city of Chicago, there is a 16-year difference in life expectancy for somebody that lives in Garfield Park, the community that we in, to somebody that lives in Lincoln Park, a mere 3 miles away. Anybody here from Inglewood? And Inglewood folks. That 16-year number just went to 30 years. So imagine a 30-year life expectancy difference with people that live in not only in the same county, in the same city, and even on the same side of town. So again, the work that Dr. King talked about is nowhere near completion. So it is on us to continue to fight and to continue Dr. King's legacy, to continue to fight for the poor, to fight for the disenfranchised, to fight for better access to health care, the fight for better economic justice, the fight across all races, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, and ages, because it is an issue that brings all of us together. This work is only one piece of the puzzle to help us to create a better Chicago for all of our citizens and to continue King's fight for economic justice. We as elected officials, we cannot do all of this alone, and I'm glad to be here because I know that the caliber of student here at Providence St. Mel are the same people that are going to lead us beyond where we are today. Now you all are probably wondering, what can you do? Now when Dr. King did a lot of the things that he's done, I'm almost 50 years old, and by the time King was 50, he didn't make it to 50. King died in his late 30s. And so all of the work that he did, all of the greatness that he's talked about was someone that happened really a lot of it in his 20s. So think about this. Some of you all are in your teens. In the next 5 years, you may be 20 years old. And at the same time that he did the work that he did, these ideas and greatness aren't going to come from people like me. They're going to come from young people like you. So it is incumbent upon you all to move forward and to work hard and to be everything that you all can want to be. Now, they talked about the power of the vote in a democracy. Some of you all are at the age of being able to vote. Some of you all will join the age of a majority to vote in the very near future. And I want you all to make sure that your voice is heard. The younger people from the ages of 18 to 30 are the largest body of people in this country, but are the lowest participators when it comes to the voting booth. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our forefathers fought for that right for all of us, and it's important that we continue to exercise, because if you don't exercise it, it's very easy for it to be taken away. When you look at states in the South and all of the laws around voter suppression, you got to stand in line for hours. You can't hand somebody a bottle of water in sweltering heat to vote. That is illegal in some states in this union. So we have to understand and know that we are in a situation where people do not want us to exercise our franchise and be part of the process. And let me say this, each one of you all are here because somebody cares about you. People, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think every time I see that money evaporate out of my bank account every month to pay tuition, somebody cares about you. I think about it. I had to go buy a Chevy because I really wanted a Cadillac, but I had to think about the fact that I had to make sure that my daughter gets a good education. So imagine what people can do with these funds every month, but they're investing them into you. Young people are being invested in. So believe me, somebody cares about you. Someone cares enough for you to make sure that you have a better opportunity in life. I don't want to sell any more raffle tickets. I don't want to hear from Ms. Dixon. But yet still I know it is part of the game plan for creating a better future for my family. But again, those sacrifices that your parents and your family is making to bring you here, because they want you to be a success. Dr. King wanted you to be a success. Congressman Lewis wants you to be a success. Alderman Ervin wants you to be a success. And that is why we put this emphasis in investing in our future. Now, what would happen if we would have turned and looked the other way and not participate and not deal with the things that are going on around us and just simply give up and give up on you? That is not what we're charged to do today. It is charged for us to make sure that you all create a better environment, not only for yourselves, but for your fellow man and for your community. Because it is never too late to start championing causes that you care about. And look at ways for you all to become involved in what is happening. And again, I implore each and every one of you all to take advantage of this situation here at Providence St. Mel to do not only good for yourselves, to do good for our community, to be to be a change agent for the future, and for you all to continue, in the words of John Lewis, to get in good trouble. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you.